Barron Trump was walking through Central Park, taking his usual quiet stroll. He wasn't trying to draw attention, nor was he concerned about his last name. In fact, it seemed like a perfect escape from the heavy spotlight he usually found himself in. With his hoodie pulled low over his face and hands in his pockets, Barron blended in like just another person trying to enjoy a peaceful moment amid the noise of New York City. He didn't mind the anonymity. In fact, he cherished it. For Barron, these solitary moments were rare. Most of the time he was in the public eye, his every move scrutinized by the press. But here, walking through the park, he could breathe. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of freshly bloomed flowers and damp earth. Birds chirped overhead, and a cool breeze rustled the leaves of the trees. It was a small slice of tranquility in a world that often felt anything but. As Barron wandered deeper into the park, past the joggers, dog walkers, and families enjoying picnics, something caught his eye. At the edge of a small pond, near a well-worn path, he noticed a squirrel lying on its side, its small chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The animal's fur was matted, and its eyes were barely open. It was clear that the squirrel was in distress, perhaps even dying. Barron paused for a moment, his gaze fixed on the creature. He didn't know why, but he felt a strange connection to the squirrel. He had never been one to shy away from moments of vulnerability, and here in this quiet corner of the park, there was something about the little animal's struggle that hit him in a way he couldn't ignore. He glanced around, half expecting someone else to notice the squirrel and take charge. But no one stopped. The park was busy as always, but the people passing by didn't give the squirrel a second glance. They were too absorbed in their own worlds, too caught up in their own lives to stop for something as small and fleeting as an animal in pain. Barron stood there for a moment longer, feeling an overwhelming need to act. Why wasn't anyone helping? It was a simple question, but it gnawed at him. The more Barron looked at the creature, the more he realized that he couldn't just walk away. Even if he didn't have a clear solution, he knew he had to try. He stepped closer to the squirrel, kneeling down carefully to avoid startling it. Barron's heart was pounding in his chest as he gently reached out, his fingers trembling as he touched the animal's fur. The squirrel's body was cold and stiff, but it was still breathing. It seemed to be fighting for every breath, clinging to life despite its injuries. Barron knew he wasn't a veterinarian. He wasn't trained to deal with animals in distress, but that didn't stop him. What if no one else came? What if this little creature died alone? That thought was unbearable. With a deep breath, Barron scooped the squirrel up carefully, holding it gently in his hands as he stood. It was light, fragile, almost too small to be real. He wasn't sure what to do next, but he knew he couldn't leave it there to suffer. As Barron looked around, still holding the squirrel in his hands, he spotted a woman jogging nearby. She was young, maybe in her 20s, with a ponytail that bounced as she ran. Barron could see that she had noticed the scene. She slowed her pace as she came closer, her brow furrowed with concern. She stopped beside him, her eyes darting between Barron and the squirrel. "Oh my God, is it okay?" she asked, her voice filled with worry. Barron could sense her empathy in the way she asked, the genuine concern in her tone. She didn't hesitate to stop and assess the situation, unlike most others who passed by. I'm not sure," Barron said, his voice soft but filled with uncertainty. "It's a squirrel. It's injured, and I don't think it's going to make it if I leave it here." The woman knelt beside him, her eyes scanning the squirrel for a moment before returning to Barron. "I can help," she said. "I know a vet nearby. I can take it there and they'll know what to do." Barron stared at her, slightly taken aback by her willingness to help. "You'd do that?" he asked, a little surprised that a stranger would offer assistance without hesitation. The woman nodded, her expression determined. "Yes, of course. I have a towel in my bag. We'll wrap it up and I'll take it to the animal hospital just a few blocks away. They'll know what to do." Barron exhaled in relief, grateful that someone was offering to help. He had never expected to encounter someone like this, a stranger who cared so deeply for an animal in distress. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I'm Barron, by the way." "I'm Emily," she replied with a warm smile, her energy comforting as she stood to grab the towel from her bag. Barron watched as she swiftly wrapped the squirrel in the towel, securing it gently. The squirrel's tiny body shivered in her arms, but its breath was steady now, no longer as shallow as before. The two of them hurried to the animal hospital, walking briskly through the park streets. Barron couldn't help but feel a sense of hope rising within him. The animal wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't sure what the outcome would be, but at this moment the squirrel was being given a chance. When they arrived at the animal hospital, the staff took the squirrel from their hands immediately. The receptionist was kind but swift, leading them into the back of the hospital. Barron and Emily were left in the waiting room, both anxious but hopeful. Barron sat in silence, his fingers tapping nervously against his knee. Had they acted quickly enough? The minutes seemed to stretch on. Barron couldn't sit still. He got up and paced a few steps, his thoughts consumed with worry for the small creature. He knew he couldn't control the outcome, but he wanted to believe that he had done the right thing. He wanted to believe that the squirrel, despite everything, would survive. Finally, the vet returned, a relieved expression on his face. "It's going to be okay," the vet said, smiling. "We've stabilized it. It was touch and go there for a moment, but it looks like with some rest and a bit of care, it should make a full recovery." Barron's heart soared with relief. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I'm really glad I brought it in." The vet nodded, his tone professional yet kind. "You did the right thing. It needed someone to act quickly. It was in bad shape, but with the right care, it'll pull through." Barron turned to Emily, his eyes reflecting the gratitude he felt. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said earnestly. "You really helped make this happen." Emily smiled, shrugging as if it were nothing. "It was nothing. Just glad we could help." Barron couldn't shake the feeling that this was one of those moments in life that mattered, even if it seemed small to the outside world. He hadn't saved the squirrel alone, Emily's kindness had made all the difference. Together, they had done something that would forever change the course of that little animal's life. As Barron and Emily left the animal hospital, Barron couldn't help but reflect on the significance of the day's events. The world had moved on and the hustle of the city had resumed, but Barron had learned something invaluable. It wasn't about grand gestures or public accolades. Sometimes, the most profound moments of connection and compassion came when no one was looking. The story of the squirrel spread quickly. Photos of Barron, his face soft with concern as he held the tiny creature in his hands, went viral. The media usually focused on his family's political influence and couldn't ignore this moment of pure humanity. The public was moved not just by Barron's actions but by its simplicity. He had seen a creature in need and had acted without question. The squirrel made a full recovery and was later released back into the wild. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it was a victory nonetheless. And for Barron, it was a reminder that kindness, compassion, and taking action in the face of suffering could change the world in ways no one could predict. As for Barron, that afternoon in Central Park would stay with him for a long time. It wasn't the accolades or the public recognition that made it meaningful. It was the simple act of reaching out to help when no one else would. At that moment, Barron Trump made a difference not just for a dying squirrel but for himself too.